Welcome to Know Your Network, the bi-weekly series that explores thought-provoking topics that reveal the challenges carriers face managing today's fast-changing networks. Did you know that there is a 53% increase in success rate of AI projects when they are centrally coordinated? Here are your hosts, Ken Gold and Scott Sumner.
So today's question is, are existing approaches to automation enough? So that's a really interesting question, Scott, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a controversial one, but let's see what happens.
Automation is changing in some ways, right? It used to be more robotic, it used to be more scripted, but now it's a lot more decisional, right? And a lot of those decisions can be triggered by a person saying, look, I want automation on demand to do this for me, which is something we're getting used to as people with our phones, talking to them, telling them what we want. Right. But in the future and more, AI is going to be making the calls on what to do next, and it's going to be a lot more adaptive, and that's what's really different about it today.
Yeah, of course. So interesting statistic. 91% of the CSPs that we spoke to or saw in some survey results said that they need real-time monitoring and analytics, and primarily they need it to see what to automate and to know if that and to know if that automation actually worked when they do automate it. So it comes back down to visibility, right? That's an interesting
automate what you can't see, and I think you can't control something you can't measure, right? So these are the real basics about statistical process control, and the network is becoming really a statistical-driven system over the next few years, and that's so really the inputs are becoming much more critical. Like we used to see monitoring as an afterthought, right? It would come after the services were deployed and maybe they didn't work quite the way they thought it would, so they put more monitoring in to see what they were missing. But now they're getting spec'd in right with the 5G systems right from the beginning. Sure.
Yeah, they've moved from the necessary evil to just the necessary piece.
Yeah, but that's not what they have today, right? They're still living with their existing systems, and like you just pointed out, there's a lot of gaps there.
Yeah, there are a lot of gaps, and in fact, that's some of the other things that we found out. First thing, then, this one kind of surprised me, is that 65% of the CSPs say they don't actually have a real-time data capture solution, or at least not one that gives them that information ubiquitously. So that's an interesting number.
Yeah, there's a lot of storage, a lot of stored to disk. There's a lot of big data systems. That was the trend from the past 10 years, and now we're moving into a little data environment where you want to do your stream processing, real-time detection in machine learning before you put it into the big data system, so you can use that data right away. And I think that's something that they're talking about. A lot of the systems report on 1 5-minute, 15-minute intervals, but they want to be able to act within seconds or less than that.
Sure. And then they also tell us about 78% of them are saying that their service assurance systems don't have any form of automation. They're legacy systems of some sort, and they're not automated. They're not tied into an automation solution, which actually kind of ties to the next point, which is that 50% of them say their service assurance solutions actually don't offer APIs, at least APIs that would do that.
Yeah. Well, what was the way you got data out of these systems before, right?
Sure.
CSV file, push.
Yeah.
SNMP gets stuff like that. So I mean, these things were one-way systems. They weren't designed to be controlled adaptively or to be done on demand when needed to serve a certain problem, right? So the fact that they don't have any automation isn't really surprising. There's a little bit of automation inside individual service assurance systems, but the big problem is that they don't talk to each other. Right. And today, if you look at a specific problem like video or voice, IMS problems, you really need to look at a lot of different layers to figure out what's going on. And those are the systems we need to automate together so that you can avoid those dozens of emails between people in different groups trying to figure out, is it the fiber, is it the RAN, is it the transport? Sure.
And of course, it's not just that. It's these systems actually don't have any way to talk to the orchestrators that they're orchestrating thing. So that's it. Those are the things that are kind of missing. But in addition to that, it's interesting. 65% of the CSPs say that they're still plagued essentially by data quality problems. It's still preventing automation because about 25% of the data in their databases, in their solutions, in their inventory systems is either misaligned or inaccurate. So that's a problem. That's a real problem.
It's a big problem. I mean, it's a garbage in, garbage out thing. You certainly don't want to automate. Imagine you're driving a self-driving car and it was like couldn't see where you're going, but it decides to drive anyways. You don't want to do that with millions of subscribers, right? So I think there's been a lack of ownership of data quality issues inside the operator because it sort of falls in between. Each person has their own silo, each group has their own data, but no one's ever really tried to check whether they all aligned together. And you see a lot of spreadsheets running in the NOC, right? People trying to figure out what's right and wrong, correlating manually, and they rely on these manual tools and some of this tribal knowledge to keep the network going. That kind of works for a while until you try to automate, and all that information is nowhere to be found.
Right, the tribal knowledge piece is a big deal. It's a big problem. So that kind of touches on the next point. 44% of the CSPs that we spoke to say siloed operations is still their primary barrier to automation. And specifically, they're talking about they have no way of exposing the data streams to each other, to different systems. And the reason for that is there's really no clear set of standards or relevant APIs available yet. You're seeing some of that happening now in the TM forum through the open API standards. You're certainly seeing that in things like ONAP. ONAP's certainly defining functions and interfaces, but it's not embedded into these solutions yet.
No, I think it's really going to take the service providers, and we're talking to you guys, to go out there and actually push for those standards to be enforced in your bids, in the future automation integration projects. And we're starting to see that with 5G. There's so much data flying between the network functions that are generating their own probe data to the orchestrator and the network diagnostics and analytics functions, right? All these things have to talk. And if there's no common bus, there's no common API, it's just going to be a really impossible mess to glue together. And with all those systems, the service provider has to take some ownership in terms of integrating them. So they need things to be uniform. Right. And this is probably the biggest problem we have facing 5G deployments, is the ability for this closed loop network automation to actually occur because the data can exchange properly.
Right, and that actually touches on the last point there. It's a 60% almost, so 59% of the mobile operators that we've spoken to, they actually believe that siloed operations are still a barrier to their automation, right? So they know that within their own companies that they have silos, and that these silos have a hard time talking to each other. And it's probably not for a lack of willingness. It's just the complexity of it. They already have systems that they're used to using. People are trained. Yeah. The tools exist, databases exist that all have to be merged together, and that's a real problem for them.
They do speak their own language, right? When you think about it, if a common problem is video quality, and you do have video groups in the operator, they're taking care of transmission and transcoding and caching and all that. But from a person in the network operations center, they don't have all those skills. So the data that's available in a network monitoring group might be way over their head. They might just need something more basic to tell them, where is it happening and how to isolate it so that someone else can effectively work on it. But the tools in each group are not necessarily aligned in a way that they're helpful to each other yet. And that's where automation has to provide some mediation and say, okay, this group needs to know this from the other group, and make sure that's available.
Yeah, that's very true. And we see that actually in a final interesting proof point that we got out of these surveys was that about 53% increase in success rate of AI projects when they're centrally coordinated. So rather than having each group individually, each silo, if you will, create an automation or an AI-based solution that they're going to use to drive their own efficiencies, if you will. When these projects are driven through a centralized, coordinated.
Solving
effort.
A business problem first, right, as opposed to solving an operational problem first. And I think that's a new way of doing things. It's the service-oriented architecture has to flow through into the automation decisions as well.
Yeah, and it's making sure that each of the automation projects individually, even though they're going to be done within silos anyway, but they're all coordinated. They're all automating towards the same goal at that point, and there's a roadmap to building value out of that. And of course, that means that then you can fund them through a higher level thought process within the company, from the straight from the CFO down to drive value.
That's what drives success, right? Alignment and top-down control. And these are really difficult projects for a lot of people to even swallow, because they're challenging their own expertise, right? So these are important things to manage and govern from the top down. Right. And then you have to hope that all of your different vendors in the network are also doing their own level of automation so that you can benefit from that, right? So there's going to be a major push as we go. Maybe the chief automation officer is going to be a job soon, Ken.
I'm sure it might very well be. And of course, that point actually brings you back to the point you made earlier about how it's up to the carriers to make sure that they define these things very clearly within their RFIs and RFPs to make sure that their vendors are all being driven in that way. So, okay.
That's a big step forward.
Yeah. Okay, so join us again in 2 weeks when we're going to ask the question, why are 5G networks different, and how does this impact assurance? Until then, thank you.
That's it for today. We hope we've managed to challenge your perspective just a bit. If you've enjoyed listening, Please like us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you'd like to comment on what you've heard, please do so in the comments section. Thanks for listening.